My name is Greg Fredricks, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Social Studies and Blended Learning at PNW BOCES. And one of my functions is that I administer our online high school program, OC21, which is a blended learning experience. And Randy, who is from the Lower Hudson, Rick, and Diane, who's from Learner-Centered Initiatives, have really just expanded my mind. They have taught me an incredible amount about the blended and online learning process. They are fabulous teachers, they're fabulous human beings, and they're really experts in their field. And they're gonna walk you through some really concrete ways that you can begin to transform the experiences for your students, again, in these unusual times. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Randy and Diane, and thank you all for being here today.
So good morning to everybody out there. My name is Randy, and I'm pleased to be able to join up with a valued colleague and partner of mine.
Good morning,
Diane.
everyone. This is Diane.
And we want to give you a little bit of introduction and context for the next hour we're going to spend together. Here in our material on the screen, we're sharing, feel free to contact us via email afterwards. We'd love to get some feedback, some comments on the information we have to share with you. So Diane, can you give us a little context setting?
Sure. So Greg, in his opening comments, mentioned OC21, which is essentially a virtual high school in your region that's been running for 10 years. So in those 10 years, every semester we ask students to give us feedback. And the biggest theme every single semester for 10 years has been that time management and self-regulation is the hardest part of online learning for them. And so for that reason, structure is also helpful. Pacing is helpful. And they also say that they appreciate hearing and seeing their teachers' voices. In the same 10 years as we've helped teachers to adjust to teaching online, they tell us that building relationships is vital. Regular communication, multiple times a week, that is, supports learning. Specific and detailed expectations and directions are critical. And starting slow when everyone is new and slowly building up to full strength is helpful. So the session we've planned today, Randy's going to give you a little more detail about this session, connects back to some of those big pieces of learning that we've had over the last 10 years.
And in addition, ladies and gentlemen, during the past year, Diane and I have been working with a cohort of high school teachers in our region as part of a New York State Learning Technology Grant, where they've been developing and creating from scratch their own blended learning courses. And early on, as the teachers were beginning to create and post their assignments and discussion tasks that students were going to complete, we noticed that they were leaving themselves out. The online materials they were creating only included the posted instructions for assignments or simply a list of tasks for students to complete. And they had inadvertently overlooked remembering to include their voice by setting the stage for the lesson, explicitly communicating learning goals or sparking curiosity and interest, conveying why the lesson was going to be important to kids, and also giving kids a way to recap or summarize what they should have learned in that lesson for self-check or reflection. And we found that by providing a simple thinking model proved useful in their work as they were designing and building richer, cohesive, and more meaningful learning experiences for their students. So today we're here to share with you this simple model along with a variety of examples from teachers. So we'd love to understand from you. Some of you have already shared your name and introduced yourself in the chat. That's great. We'd love to know who are teachers, who might be administrators or district personnel. So take a moment and tell us who you are and maybe why you decided to join us today.
Folks, this is just a reminder for those of you that are joining us, if you wouldn't just mind muting your microphones, please, just because we do have a very large room. We have almost 50 participants in the room. So just to be mindful of the background noise, please just make sure that you do mute yourselves if you're not speaking. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nikki, for saying so. General Music Orchestra, Julia High School principal and social studies teachers, district coordinators, okay. 4th grade special ed, terrific, special. 1st grade teacher, great, great. Bridget, I love that excitement you're bringing. Hopefully we'll be able to continue that with you. Okay, so it looks like we have a terrific mix of both teachers at elementary, middle, and high, as well as some district personnel and staff and school leadership. Great, great. So we're all finding ourselves today in the midst of making a rapid shift in our work. And it's certainly a great time of innovation and creativity, but I think it's also great stress and anxiety. And I just kind of, did we know that our remote learning efforts don't have to rely solely on just posting a list of assignments or tasks for students to complete, and that we can incorporate a lot of insights from research and online and multimedia learning to our work? So for today's session, we're going to invite you to join us in exploring these guiding questions. How can we bring to bear our familiar instructional design practices to the design and creation of online lessons? And what might be a simple design model or 4 simple elements that can help me in the planning and building of online lessons and materials to create rich and engaging learning? So Diane's going to give us a quick sketch of our outline of our time together. And Greg has also posted in the chat 2 links to handout references. One of them is a link to a kind of just takeaway handout for later reference. You do not need it for today's activities. And then the second link is kind of like a set of all of the visual presentation materials. Again, you won't need it during the activities, but we wanted to provide those for you now so you could get to those and take away. So Diane?
So the model that we're using, the 4 parts are warm up, learn, do, and wrap up. We're presenting this as a model for designing asynchronous lessons. But aspects of this model can also be synchronous. Randy and I are actually modeling it within this synchronous session. So we're going to have a quick 2-minute warm up. There's going to be a learn segment where Randy and I toggle back and forth, just explaining the model and sharing examples. During that learn segment, you should be taking notes. And then we're going to go to a do segment, which will give you an opportunity to actually dabble with the model and use it a little bit to design. And then we will come back together to wrap up. So if you could reflect and jot for a minute to think about, in your traditional classroom, in what ways do you typically open or start a class or lesson? What methods do you use when you introduce new content or skills? And how do you recap or summarize before your students run out the door or before you transition to the next focus of the day?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kind of jump off with taking a look at each of the 4 parts of this simple model and look at some examples for warm up, learn, do, and wrap up. We want you to listen to the explanation of each part and closely examine the examples that we'll have on screen for you. During the introduction to each part and examples, jot notes for yourself on a piece of paper about the 4 parts or questions you can post in the chat. And then at the end of each of the 4 segments, we're going to pause for a few seconds and allow people to reflect and or ask a question or post a comment. So the first part of the model reminds us that it's important to explicitly convey learning goals, spark students' interest, set the context and relevance for our lessons, and help students focus their attention to get ready for any learning activity. These questions can help me think about the warm-up part of my lesson. Now, a warm-up could be as simple as providing a list of the guiding questions, or a simple audio or video introduction from a teacher. A warm-up might also include an activity for students, similar to a do now or discussion thinking prompt. So let's take a look and listen at a couple of examples.
So this first example is an introduction to a lesson. It is short, and we're going to listen to it. It is also from my practice. So go ahead, Randy.
Good morning, writers. Today's lesson is going to be focused on a revision strategy called pruning the bushes. This strategy helps writers to tighten their writing by removing unnecessary words or phrases. So you're going to see that I've uploaded a screencast for you where I'm modeling how to prune my own writing. I'd like you to watch and pay attention to the kind of thinking you see me doing as I'm reading and pruning my writing for unnecessary words and phrases. After you watch the screencast, your assignment will be to use the strategy on your own draft of your memoir that's currently in your Google Drive.
Okay, so that was a very short introduction. It was less than a minute long, but students had a chance to hear my voice in introducing the screencast and the assignment. Here are two other examples. In these cases, teachers are using an online discussion as a warm-up. In the first example, Denise Flood, as she's teaching students about innovation, has students warm up by reading a short article on innovative breakthroughs and having them have a discussion as they get ready to dig into other material. Now, those are high school students. On the bottom, you'll see a warm-up where the discussion is really sort of to tap prior knowledge. So this teacher asks students to actually engage and provide an opinion before they read. Here are two other examples of introductions that don't require students to be as active, but they introduce the new content. So on the left, you see Chris Gatt is kind of telling students this lesson is about shot sizes, camera angles, camera movements. And on the right side, he offers some questions for students to think about and introduces some vocabulary, the angle, the shot size, and the motion, and then the specific, more specific vocabulary underneath that.
So a warm-up is just that spark start intro into setting the context for students as they kind of get focused and attentive to an upcoming activity or assignment. It's also a great way to convey to students why this assignment that's going to be coming up is important to them. So take 30 seconds, make a couple of notes for yourself. What might be some possibilities that come to mind for you about conveying learning goals, doing a spark start, or having a warm-up segment for your online lessons? Okay, the next part, learn, basically considers the what's and how's for when I need to introduce students to new knowledge, skills, or information, to think about that mini lesson, demonstration, or new content I'm going to introduce that adds on to prior learning. And these questions can help me think about and make decisions for the learn part of my online materials or activities. A learn segment of my lesson might include an article to read, a video to watch, or teachers' recorded screencast presentation where they might model a particular strategy or skill. And here are a couple of examples from some learn segments that teachers have created for their online lessons.
So this first example is a screencast. If you are introducing a new skill or want to model for students how to do something, a screencast is a great way to do that. So we're going to listen to a piece of this screencast, not all of it. And this is a teacher teaching for the first time how to write a thesis statement.
And Diane, I'm going to start it. Let's listen to the opening, and then you let me know when we might want to skip ahead to a later part.
I think listen for a few minutes at the opening and then skip ahead to like 1 minute. And then
Okay.
you can see a little bit there.
Okay, so I'm going to model the process of writing a thesis statement for a mock speech that I have here. So this speech is a little bit of a more elementary level speech, so just bear with me. Thought it might be good to start with something a little bit simpler so that we can really work on the skill of writing a thesis statement and then work our way up to writing thesis statements for your more complicated persuasive speeches. So we have here a sort of a loose outline of a mock speech. So there's somewhat of an intro paragraph written, and then there are 3 ideas for body paragraphs. So the intro paragraph reads, "There are many exciting and beautiful creatures in our oceans. There are fierce sharks, inky..." So let me see, you want to skip ahead to a segment where the teacher is doing and give our reasons why. So that would be that dolphins, they are intelligent, caring, and strong. And there you go. So therefore, dolphins are the best sea creatures because they are intelligent, caring, and strong. Now, let's see, what could a different thesis statement look like? So how about, maybe we could reverse the order. So because they are intelligent, caring, and strong, dolphins are the best animals in the ocean. Okay. So now we'll take a look at another mock speech, one that's a little bit more complicated, and we'll try to write thesis statements together.
So if you are familiar with the I do, we do, you do, gradual release of responsibility, this is the I do. So when you want to model, the screencast is a way to do that. And this entire screencast was just about, I think, 3 minutes. Or just under 3 minutes.
An interesting practice I see many teachers do is that thinking aloud during the moment of doing a screencast can be really vital and valuable. Sometimes we might get over concerned with making it a polished presentation, but that thinking aloud, doing it in process and working it out gives the student kind of like looking over the shoulder of their instructor as they're thinking and working out the problem. So not every screencast has to be a perfectly polished model, and sometimes it's valuable to just let kids see you do something in process.
Okay, so here's another example from Chris Gatt's class. He uses a video for his Learn segment, but notice that he gives students some specifics, asking them to watch. And then he's using a structure that he uses in his classroom regularly called watch, summarize, question. And he wants them to take notes using a WSQ sheet. So even with giving a video, he is asking students to be active, and he's using a familiar strategy or structure for them in this learning segment. Here's another example. In this case, the teacher uses step 1, step 2, step 3 to structure for students and has a short video paired with a text. And so just like in the classroom where we pair different texts, you can pair different texts online for a learning segment. So take 30 seconds to jot. What are some possibilities for a learning segment for your practice?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, do. The do segment is the most familiar to all of us as teachers. Do focuses on those moments when we have students practice, apply, and assess their knowledge, skills, and what they understand. These questions can help me make decisions about the critical aspects for those do assignments, discussions, formative or summative assessment activities, or reflection opportunities that we create for our students. So using discussion forums, turning in assignments online, using a Flipgrid or other digital tool as assigned tasks for students to complete or activities. And again, here are a couple of examples from some teachers in their online lessons for Do.
So notice in this example that the teacher's not using the terminology we're using of warm up, learn, do, wrap up, but you can tell from the icons kind of where the learning and the doing happens. So there's a link and there's a text. Those are probably the learning segments in our model. And then there's two different assignments there. Those are the do segments. And that forum is a way for them to do again and wrap up at the end of this lesson.
Now, this is a good moment to kind of pause and share with everybody what we know intuitively is this learn do can sometimes be reversed or engages in a cycle of repetition. So a learn segment, then a do segment, then a learn segment and a do segment, or do, learn, do, learn. The important aspect is just to be deliberate in my choices and clearly breaking down my overall materials into small chunks or segments. This is one insight we learned from a lot of online learning research and multimedia learning research, because by breaking our activities down into small segments, online learners are able to know where they are, what's coming up next, and work for a little bit, leave, and then come back later to continue. So it's not a prescription in this sequence, but just being deliberate with knowing and thinking about where am I targeting a learn moment versus a do moment, and then marrying those together in some kind of sequence that's appropriate for the topic or lesson or content area.
So here you'll see in this example, this is Denise Flood in Bronxville again. She's reversed the do and the learn. So she has a warm up and then she asks students to actually brainstorm. So she, in a sense, she's tapping prior knowledge, asking them to think about what they already know before they do some new learning and before they go to a do segment. So jot some notes for possibilities for do segments, and also, again, feel free to post questions in the chat. We're going to try to come back to those.
I noticed an interesting commentary and conversation from some folks about the options and ideas around turn-in talks to be stop and jots. So already some great information sharing and idea generation amongst our community together. That's really great. Thank you, everyone.
Just to jump in real quick, Randy and Diane had a really interesting point posed in here, thinking about processing and processing time. So if we can incorporate just talking a little bit to that. So as part of that process, I think you're doing a terrific job of really underlining how purposeful, stop and jot has to be, that very deliberate design. But if we can talk a little bit about building in that processing time, that would be terrific as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I was even just having a personal, when you're not physically in the presence of other humans, time can take place and it feels different. I was even thinking these little stop and jots are perfect opportunities for all of us to practice our 20 seconds of happy birthday like we would be doing washing our hands. And sometimes that can feel like an enormous chasm of time. I'm sitting here being quiet and in my head I'm going, okay, are people bored? Is it going? Are they working and everything? And I find that just comes with practice over time, that quietness or peacefulness, even when we're online together, is important. And 30 seconds will seem like a long time.
So Randy, I would add though that in an asynchronous model, the pauses can still be structured for students in the learning sequence. So, and that's how the model can help. So for example, the wrap up is can be a discussion where students do have time to process and think before they post. So if you're working asynchronously, there's actually more time for processing, but it just can't be left kind of wide open. You still need to guide students in that processing piece.
And that's where sometimes this idea of thinking about warm-up can be easily overlooked, but it's really critical. After all of the time that a learner spends working through our activities and assignments, before they move on or leave class, the wrap-up segment allows them to pause, review what they maybe should have learned, and reflect on that process. So these questions can help me consider how best I want to include a wrap-up moment in my online lessons. Very often, a quick wrap-up can simply be revisiting and reminding students of the warm-up. What were the learning goals or information that we started out with? For asynchronous online materials, even just posting those guiding questions at the end with a quick check of think to yourself and make sure you feel comfortable with our original learning goals. Or it might be a formal activity like a reflection discussion or students sharing their own recap of what they learned. So here are a couple of examples from some teachers of different wrap-ups.
So in this example, the teacher uses step 1, step 2, step 3 as her structure, and she uses it regularly so that every time students come in, they know there's kind of 3 steps they have to do, and she has a final reflection as a wrap-up. Here are 2 others, or actually 3 others. So there's the first one, students are asked to do a self-check using a checklist on how well they participated in online discussion. So there's a self-feedback opportunity. The second one asks students to kind of reflect and be prepared to share with the group. So there is a wrap-up there that's going to bring students back together. And that's a way to blend a synchronous meeting like this one into a lesson as a wrap-up. And then the third wrap up there is really just some questions for kids to think about as they kind of exit that lesson. Just before you reflect and jot, I'm going to actually add one thing based on yesterday's sessions that I had with teachers, is that sometimes the wrap up can be another audio or video 30-second or 1-minute clip from the teacher saying, you know, great job doing the work today or this week. Here's what I see you doing well. Here's where we're going to be going next. So even the wrap up can even be done by the teacher so that students hear your voice. So now take 30 seconds to think about wrap ups.
So that's a quick walkthrough of this simple 4-part structure: warm up, learn, do, and wrap up. And now we want to give you a do chunk of time. And Diane, give us a quick overview of what we want to focus on during these next 10 minutes.
Okay, so for teachers in the group, think about an upcoming lesson and use the 4-part structure to brainstorm possibilities. 10 minutes won't be enough for you to design the whole thing. And so this is just a chance for you to think about the 4 parts. For leaders, think about an upcoming learning focus that you would like to bring to the adults you work with. So for example, yesterday, I was using the warm up, learn, do, wrap up to think through a feedback session that I've been asked to facilitate. So use the model to think about the 4-part structure in an asynchronous way, or even if you want to blend by using an asynchronous and some parts of it as synchronous. So we're going to all mute and just work for 10 minutes. Randy, you'll use a timer for us. And
yep.
The model is up on the screen now so that you can see the 4 parts. And remember that the learn and the do are flexible. Sometimes they're combined, they're reversed. They might happen twice inside of the sequence.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you, we hope you had some time to begin drafting and sketching or doodling. And we'd love to get some, hear from you about your thoughts on what happened as you were using the model, what was easy, what was hard, share an example of a particular approach you were thinking about. And folks can feel free to, I guess Greg might help you manage a bit. We can leave it open for folks to unmute their microphone themselves and share a quick audio comment with the whole group, or folks can post in the chat. Give us an example or a reaction to what you were thinking and what was it like for you.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, Robin.
We can hear you, Robin. You're good.
Can you see me?
We can. So if you go to the bottom left-hand corner, if you do want to be seen, bottom left-hand corner, little video camera icon. If you click on that, it would unmute basically your camera.
Okay.
Here we go. Yep, there you are.
Okay, it's dark a little bit. I really appreciate you guys doing this training online, and I guess what was striking me was the nice simplistic steps, because I tend to try to do too much. And I have a lesson that I'm going to launch in a couple days for my students. I teach 8th grade social studies, and we're trying to introduce the Cold War. And I'm just realizing, you know, normally I would be talking to the kids and have that lesson during the day, and then the homework would be practice, review, or introduction. But now I feel like I'm trying to do everything at once. So number one, I was reflecting that I need to keep it simpler, but just add the pieces of me talking and try to engage kids and give them that quiet time to work independently. So it was very helpful, and it reminded me I might need to do less and just swap out a few things. But it definitely is not easy trying to do everything from home.
Yes. So thank you, Robin, for that highlight of simplicity and keeping things simple. That makes me think, and to offer to the group, sometimes when working with teachers, they already have an idea of the assignment that they need for students to work on. And just doing a simple, well, share with them a quick introduction for that warm-up, either just the guiding questions of the learning targets or objectives, or a quick little intro, setting the context, and then just adding on a simple wrap-up, reflection, or recap. And keeping it simple and straightforward is always a smart thing for all of us to do. So thank you, Robin. Somebody else, any examples of strategies for the different parts, or just a reflection on what happened and what were you thinking as you used the model?
Go ahead, Mary. Mary has her hand up.
Hi, everyone. I was thinking of it, you know, we've been doing a lot of professional learning around some of the new digital tools and making sure all of our teachers feel comfortable with it. So I was designing with that in mind. So thinking of something like Seesaw, you know, when you're warming up, first of all, like, you know, maybe an intro to what the tool does, but then, you know, why would you use this tool and when? Because I think with adult learners, but I'm seeing it in this context even more and more true for younger learners as well, the purpose has to be so important, because it can feel like I'm just going through some activities, but why would I use this tool and when, and how it might help me, I think is a really good thing to begin with, you know, for the warm up. And then, you know, thinking learn and do, like tutorials on the basic features, but allowing, and I see that as recursive, you know, back and forth. I show you something, you're trying it, we're coaching, we go back and we show something else, that kind of thing, allowing people time to create, so kind of a workshop model.
Mhm.
And then wrapping up, thinking about, what else I might need for my learning to use this tool, or, even thinking about when I might use it a little more closely and critically. And then also time to explore when you're thinking about a new tool. Sometimes you just need that time to play. It was helpful to have that as well.
Right.
But it was really helpful to have this structure to kind of focus. And I think for participants, knowing the structure at the beginning of the session could be really helpful, just as you did. So I really like that it's just 4 parts, and it sounds like they're all manageable in manageable chunks.
And again, I'll just say that teachers kind of do this in their classrooms, but they're forgetting that they need to bring it to the asynchronous or online format. And so it is a simple model because it resonates with most teachers. They understand the parts.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a nice framework for reminding them to bring those parts online.
Yeah, I feel like the learn and do might be a little different depending on whether you're synchronous or asynchronous. So like knowing that up front and keeping that in mind is really helpful.
Yeah. Bridget had her hand up. Go ahead, Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So some of us from Hawthorne Elementary School were talking on the side a little bit and brainstorming. And we really liked the model because it helped us like focus what we needed to do, because it's a little bit overwhelming for us with the little ones with all the technology. But we said it would be really important to use visuals and model to make it a little less overwhelming for them. But then it also was a little bit tricky when we were thinking about it, because we were like, we want to use Flipgrid and Padlet, but we have to spread it out between different lessons because the transition for them might be hard using multiple different strategies within one lesson. So we were trying to focus on one per lesson so that it would be a little bit easier for them to navigate.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah. And I hear, Bridget, am I correct in thinking you guys are, your mind focuses on like live engagements with your little ones? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing, Diane and I have talked about, and from our own background experiences, there's similarities, but some very critically unique differences. And while all the examples we currently have curated are from kind of posted digital learning materials, it's a good for any kind of online engagement. It just be deliberate, be concise, and a warm-up can be a 30-second, hey, guys and gals, did you know that? And that's it. That's my spark. And then you can move on and get to the meat, but just then not forgetting, well, let's go back and recap what we did. So yeah, and I would be curious to hear more when you do your live with your littles, what you come up with and what kinds of activities and how they respond. That would be great to hear.
Yeah, we haven't done live yet. We've just been pre-recording ourselves with Screencastify. Yeah. So fingers crossed for when we go live.
Keep it simple. As Robin reminded us, keep it simple.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing, Bridget.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or wonderings? I do want to just be cognizant of the time, and we do have about 3 minutes left.
Okay. So Diane, I think I want to share with folks our tip sheets, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think just show them that where they are again in the chat.
Okay.
I don't think we need to walk them through necessarily.
Do you want me to repost those? I can repost them.
Could you?
Like me to. Yeah.
That would be great, Greg.
Give me a second. Let me just go grab them.
While Greg's going to post those takeaway links in the chat, included in there, you're going to find these 2 information sheets. We know people who are using different tool sets and platforms, but as a marrying between the design aspects and the mechanics of building and creating, here are some tips for folks who might be using Google Classroom and classwork tools, using topics to organize your materials, and then just a highlight of the different classwork tools for different warm-up, learn, do, or wrap-up activities. For anybody who's using the Schoology LMS and their course materials, again, folders help me organize and put all the if I'm doing like a 4-parter or a 3-parter, put it in a folder so they're kind of there and easily organized. Use a discussion for either a warm-up or a do, using an assignment for a learn, or an assessment, a quiz for a wrap-up. So there'll be these tip sheets that just kind of help provide a crosswalk of thinking between some mechanic tools and some of the ideas in the model. And then lastly, you also have this kind of just this little reminder about the purposes, the key purposes to think about, and they just help our minds focus and orient around how could we apply our familiar instructional strategies that we as teachers do intuitively in our face-to-face classrooms, but how can we bring those into the design of our online lessons? And what are the 4 simple elements that might help me remember to include in my online instruction design? So Diane, any final wrap-up points or thoughts for you to share?
No, I will just say thank you for your attention. An hour is a significant chunk of your day, and I'm glad you were with us. You can see our emails there. I'm here if you want to email me questions, if you want to have a phone call or another Zoom chat. I'm happy to collaborate and help you think through some of the work you're doing.
And on behalf of PNW BOCES, I just want to jump in real quick and just thank Diane and Randy. Again, they've expanded my learning, and watching everybody's faces kind of light up and all the aha moments, I think that occurred today for a lot of us, and how that's going to translate to hundreds, if not thousands of students is really powerful. Just really quick, I want to encourage you to please take that survey that is in the chat log. It's invaluable in terms of kind of helping us to offer what you need in these business unusual times. So instead of business as usual, we've kind of been saying business as unusual. So if you have any thoughts on today's session, what you're learning and your takeaways were, we'll of course share those with Diane and Randy, but also just offering sessions going forward. And I did just want to take one more second, if you all indulge me, just to let you know what we have coming up today. I did post the schedule, and I'll post it again momentarily. It has live links in it. At 10 to 10:30, we have EdTech, The Wonders of Wixie with Dr. Jennifer Wilson. And then at noon, we have Generation Citizen, another excellent group coming in to talk about the US Census and how we can teach our students about that. So for our elementary teachers or for our middle or high school social studies teachers, a great opportunity to talk about the census and how it plays into the situation that we find ourselves in currently. And then we have Dr. Peter DeWitt at 1 o'clock today talking about are you activity rich and impact poor, talking about balancing what we put out versus what we get back from others. But again, thank you all for participating today. And again, thank you to Randy and Diane. And I'll turn it over for them to close us out.
So I'm just going to say thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Today is hump day for me. And it's been a pleasure always being with you, Diane and Greg together. So that's it from my end.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Be well. All right. Bye-bye.